Welcome to our new modern crime series, where we explore some of the most shocking, complex, and unforgettable crimes of recent times. In today's episode, we dive into the chilling events surrounding the Oxford High School shooting, a tragedy that not only shook a small town, but also made history with an unprecedented legal twist. This story isn't just about a senseless act of violence. It's about missed warnings, parental accountability, and the search for justice in a world that's still grappling with gun violence. If you're intrigued by real-world crime stories and want to follow along as we uncover more cases that shaped our times, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch every new episode as soon as it drops. This episode discusses sensitive topics related to gun violence and school shootings, which may be distressing for some viewers. Please watch with discretion, and if you find the content overwhelming, we encourage you to pause or seek support. Our goal is to honor the victims and spark meaningful conversations about prevention and accountability. Thank you for joining us. On November 30th, 2021, the small town of Oxford, Michigan, became the scene of an American tragedy that would grip the nation. At the heart of this story lies a 15-year-old boy named Ethan Crumbley, whose actions on that cold winter day transformed Oxford into yet another town synonymous with school shootings. Oxford sits 30 miles north of Detroit, with a modest population under 4,000. It is a town built on tradition and pride, where football and gun culture play vital roles in community identity. Hunting rifles are a common sight at proms, and nearly every household owns a gun. The quiet, tree-lined streets and colonial architecture paint a picture of a quaint, peaceful place, one that never imagined it would be thrust into the spotlight. But like many other tragedies that came before, this story would prove that even the most serene places are not immune to darkness. Oxford was known for its tight-knit, upper-middle-class families, but Ethan Crumbley's family didn't fit the usual mold. His parents, Jennifer and James Crumbley, led a different lifestyle, reflecting a more middle-class struggle compared to the wealthier residents. Jennifer held an office job, and James worked as a delivery driver for DoorDash. Their son, Ethan, was described as a lonely and isolated child, an only child they jokingly referred to as an oopsie baby. In hindsight, his behavior signaled something far more troubling than typical teenage moodiness. In the days leading up to the tragedy, red flags surrounded Ethan. He searched for bullets online during class, drew disturbing images on his math assignments, and watched violent videos on his phone. These were clear cries for help, but nobody intervened, not even after teachers repeatedly raised concerns. And on the morning of the shooting, his parents were summoned to the school for yet another meeting. Jennifer and James sat with school officials, staring at a drawing their son had made, one that depicted guns, bullets, and bloody bodies. School officials asked Ethan's parents to get him counseling, but did not demand his removal from school that day. In hindsight, it was a chilling 11-minute meeting where critical decisions were not made. Ethan's backpack remained unchecked, and nobody knew that inside it was a 9mm Sig Sauer pistol, a weapon purchased just 4 days earlier on Black Friday. The purchase was Ethan's request for a Christmas gift. With his father's help, Ethan selected the gun from a local store, Acme Shooting Goods. The very next day, Jennifer Crumbley took her son to a shooting range to practice. These were the same parents who, just days later, would be forced to confront a horrifying truth. The gun they bought their son was used to kill 4 students and wound others in a rampage at Oxford High. The tragedy would leave behind 4 dead teenagers, a devastated community, and a nation once again searching for answers. But this story doesn't end with Ethan Crumbley's arrest. It begins there, in uncharted legal territory, where prosecutors charged his parents with involuntary manslaughter for their role in enabling this unspeakable act. This is the beginning of a story not just about one troubled boy, but about how a community, a culture, and a family failed to act, and the unprecedented consequences that followed. In the weeks leading up to the shooting, Ethan Crumbley's behavior raised alarms, warnings that were tragically overlooked. Teachers and staff noticed troubling patterns, but failed to connect the pieces in time. his actions were not just teenage curiosity, they were cries for help that no one answered. At school, Ethan searched for ammunition during class on his phone and watched violent videos, unnerving teachers. One math assignment was returned with disturbing sketches, images of guns, bullets, and bleeding bodies. Ethan's behavior wasn't just strange, it was alarming. Multiple emails were sent to his parents from concerned staff, but nothing was done. When Jennifer Crumbley received a message from the school about Ethan searching for bullets, her response to him was chilling. "LOL, I'm not mad, just learn not to get caught." The red flags were everywhere, but each warning went unanswered. Ethan's isolation grew, along with his obsession with violence. His mind was spiraling, but his teachers, parents, and counselors failed to intervene effectively. On the morning of November 30th, 2021, Ethan's parents were called to the school after his disturbing math assignment drew fresh concern. In the office that morning, Jennifer and James Crumbley sat face to face with school officials, looking at Ethan's violent drawings. Guns and bloody bodies scrawled across the paper. The school asked them to get Ethan counseling, but no one searched his backpack, which sat inches away. The meeting lasted just 11 minutes. Jennifer and James promised to seek counseling for Ethan within 48 hours, but they refused to take him home that day, and the school did not demand it. Ethan was sent back to class, with his gun still hidden inside his bag. It was a moment that could have changed everything, a critical decision not to act. If someone had looked inside that backpack, they would have found the 9mm Sig Sauer pistol his father had purchased just 4 days earlier. Instead, Ethan returned to class, waiting for the perfect moment to carry out the violent plan he had meticulously scripted in his journals. The final warning had been missed. No one could have predicted what would happen next, except Ethan. In his twisted mind, everything was going according to plan. The tragedy that would soon unfold was not an accident. It was the product of missed warnings, ignored signs, and unchecked danger. Oxford High School would join the growing list of places forever changed by gun violence, and the Crumbley family would face unprecedented legal consequences for the events that were about to unfold. At 12:50 p.m. on November 30th, 2021, the halls of Oxford High School transformed from a place of learning into a scene of chaos and terror. Inside the boys' bathroom at the south end of the school, Ethan Crumbley unzipped his backpack and pulled out the 9mm Sig Sauer pistol his parents had bought just days earlier. The plan he had meticulously crafted in his journals was about to unfold. The sound of gunfire echoed through the hallways as classrooms were locked down. Teachers acted quickly, blocking doors with desks and covering windows, trying to shield their students from the carnage outside. Some students jumped out of windows, landing in the snow, desperate to escape. Others lay still, pretending to be lifeless, hoping Ethan would pass them by. But Ethan wasn't finished. Inside one of the bathrooms, 2 boys, a freshman and a senior named Justin Schilling, hid in a stall. Justin, determined to protect the younger boy, whispered instructions to stand on the toilet so their feet couldn't be seen beneath the stall door. But Ethan found them. Ethan ordered the 2 boys to come out of the stall and line up against the wall. Justin stepped forward, doing his best to shield the younger boy. Ethan raised his gun without hesitation and shot Justin in the head. As the younger boy scrambled away in fear, Ethan turned and calmly walked back into the hallway. The entire attack lasted only minutes, but in that short span, Ethan took the lives of 4 students and left several others critically wounded. Madison Baldwin, Tate Meyer, and Hannah St. Juliana were killed instantly. Justin Schilling fought for his life, but succumbed to his injuries the next day. As Ethan continued down the hallway, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived on the scene. Ethan had no intention of going down in a blaze of gunfire. Just as he had planned, he surrendered without resistance, calmly placing the pistol on the ground and raising his hands. In a chilling twist, Ethan showed no emotion, as though the events had gone exactly as he imagined. The officers arrested him on the spot and escorted him out of the school in handcuffs, as ambulances rushed to the scene to treat the injured and transport the dead. The students and teachers of Oxford High School were left reeling from the unthinkable. For some, the trauma would remain with them for the rest of their lives. Parents rushed to the scene, desperate to know if their children were safe. For the families of the victims, their worst fears had come true. But the fallout from this tragedy was only beginning. Ethan Crumbley was now in custody, and the nation would soon learn the unsettling truth about the events that led to this horrific day. But this story wasn't just about a troubled teenager with a gun. For the first time in American history, the parents of the shooter would face charges for their role in enabling the tragedy. What had started with a 9mm pistol would soon lead to an unprecedented legal battle, one that would challenge the very notion of parental responsibility. As law enforcement swarmed Oxford High School and students were evacuated, the Crumbleys' worst fears were confirmed. Word of the shooting spread like wildfire across the small town, sending parents rushing to the school, desperate for news about their children. But among the flood of panicked texts and phone calls, the reaction from Ethan's parents was disturbingly different. When Jennifer Crumbley heard about the shooting, she sent a text to Ethan that would later shock investigators. "Ethan, don't do it." At the same time, James Crumbley drove home in a panic. His mind raced, not with concern that his son might be harmed, but with the fear that Ethan was the shooter. When James arrived at their house, he immediately checked the gun safe. The moment he saw the 9mm Sig Sauer was missing, the gravity of the situation hit him. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his voice shaking with fear. James told the dispatcher that he and Jennifer had just been at the school that morning for a meeting about Ethan's behavior. He suspected that his son had taken the gun. As the 911 call unfolded, the weight of his words became painfully clear. They knew their son was troubled, and yet they did nothing to stop this from happening. It was a moment that would haunt the Crumbleys and fuel the prosecutor's decision to press charges. This wasn't a case of parents blindsided by their child's actions. They knew Ethan was struggling. They knew he had access to a gun, and yet they failed to act. As news of Ethan's arrest reached the Crumbleys, the full extent of their poor decisions became undeniable. The gun they bought for their son, the one Jennifer took him to practice shooting with, had been used to kill 4 of his classmates and wound several others. But the fallout wasn't over. As investigators dug deeper into Ethan's journals, text messages, and the Crumbleys' household, a disturbing pattern of neglect and denial emerged. Prosecutors began to piece together a narrative that was not just about a young boy spiraling into violence, but about parents who ignored every warning sign and enabled the tragedy. With the gun missing and Ethan in custody, the Crumbleys had to confront the harsh reality of their role in the events of that day. But rather than cooperating fully, the Crumbleys would soon take an unexpected turn, one that would lead to even more public outrage. The tragedy at Oxford High School shook the nation, but what came next was unprecedented. As investigators unraveled the story, it became clear that this wasn't just about a troubled teenager with a gun. It was about parental negligence. In a move that made legal history, prosecutors charged Jennifer and James Crumbley with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, holding them accountable for the choices that enabled Ethan's actions. Prosecutors argued that Jennifer and James Crumbley's decision to buy Ethan the gun, paired with their failure to act on red flags, constituted gross negligence. Investigators pointed to Ethan's journals and text messages, detailing his growing instability and violent plans, as proof that the parents were aware of his mental health issues. They had been warned by the school, but instead of intervening, they left the gun unsecured and allowed Ethan to return to class with a deadly weapon. During the investigation, officers discovered disturbing evidence in the Crumbleys' home. Ethan had 2 bedrooms, both filled with used shooting range targets and violent imagery pinned to the walls. Inside his parents' bedroom, officers found the gun case that had stored the 9mm pistol, lying empty on the bed. The prosecution built their case on text messages, journal entries, and the parents' own actions. Jennifer and James not only ignored clear warning signs, but they actively enabled Ethan, taking him to the shooting range the day after the gun was purchased, even though they knew his behavior was alarming. What shocked the nation most were the text exchanges between Jennifer and Ethan. When Ethan was caught searching for bullets during class, instead of expressing concern, Jennifer responded with, "Lol, you just need to learn not to get caught." And on the morning of the shooting, after the school meeting, Jennifer's only follow-up text was, "Are you okay?" Ethan replied, "Yes, sorry about that. Love you." She never responded until after the shooting had begun, with Ethan, "Don't do it." The involuntary manslaughter charges against Jennifer and James Crumbley were unprecedented. Prosecutors argued that by purchasing the gun for their troubled son and failing to secure it properly, they were directly responsible for the deaths of 4 innocent students. With the nation watching, the Crumbleys were left to confront the consequences of their actions. But instead of cooperating with the investigation, Jennifer and James made a desperate decision, one that would lead them down a darker path. The first parents ever charged for the actions of a school shooter were now on the run. In the days following the shooting, as news of the charges against Jennifer and James Crumbley spread, the Crumbleys did something that would leave the entire country stunned. They went on the run. Instead of turning themselves in, the Crumbleys withdrew all their savings from the bank, including Ethan's account, and disappeared without a trace. Their lawyers claimed that the couple wasn't fleeing, but simply getting their affairs in order. However, authorities believed otherwise. The parents of a school shooter now facing manslaughter charges were officially on the run. Law enforcement launched a full-scale manhunt, tracking the couple's movements. For nearly 2 days, the Crumbleys evaded capture. Investigators traced their final location to Detroit, about 50 miles from Oxford. Late that night, the police received a tip. A suspicious car was parked near an art studio, and someone had seen 2 people sneaking inside. Officers surrounded the building, moving in cautiously. When they broke down the door, they found Jennifer and James Crumbley huddled together inside the studio, disheveled and exhausted. They were immediately taken into custody, ending the short but dramatic search. The Crumbleys were charged with fleeing arrest and were denied bail, making their situation even more dire. Their attempt to run not only deepened public outrage, but also strengthened the prosecution's case against them. In the eyes of the public, the Crumbleys' decision to run confirmed their guilt. Instead of facing the consequences of their actions, they had tried to escape responsibility, leaving their 15-year-old son alone in jail, facing the rest of his life in prison. The contrast between Ethan's incarceration and his parents' desperate flight was stark. The same parents who failed to protect their son from his downward spiral were now abandoning him entirely, running to save themselves. The Crumbleys were arraigned separately, facing additional scrutiny for their failed escape attempt. The court system, the community, and the victims' families were united in their outrage. How could these parents have fled while their son faced the full weight of the law? But the legal proceedings were just beginning. The Crumbleys would now have to face 2 trials, one for Jennifer and one for James. These trials would become the focus of national attention, setting a legal precedent for how far parental responsibility extends in the wake of a child's crime. The nation watched as the first of 2 historic trials began. Jennifer Crumbley would stand trial, marking the first time in American history that the parents of a school shooter faced manslaughter charges. The question at the heart of the case was simple, yet unsettling. Were the Crumbleys responsible for the deaths of 4 students because of their negligence and inaction? The trial began on January 25, 2024, with Jennifer's defense team taking an unexpected and controversial approach. Her lawyer opened by quoting Taylor Swift lyrics, saying, "Band-Aids don't fix bullet holes." The meaning was clear. They argued that blaming Jennifer for Ethan's actions was merely a distraction from the larger societal issue of gun violence in America. However, this argument did not sit well with the public or the jury. Testimony soon revealed that Jennifer Crumbley had repeatedly ignored signs that Ethan was in crisis. Witnesses testified about Jennifer's dismissive attitude toward her son, revealing a pattern of emotional neglect. The court heard how Jennifer focused more on her horses and her affair than on her troubled child. Evidence presented by the prosecution included text messages exchanged between Jennifer and Ethan. When Ethan was caught searching for bullets in class, Jennifer responded, "LOL, I'm not mad. You just have to learn not to get caught." In another message sent shortly after the school meeting on the day of the shooting, Ethan apologized to his mother, saying, "Sorry about that. I love you." Jennifer didn't respond until 30 minutes into the rampage with a chilling text, "Ethan, don't do it." Jennifer took the stand in her own defense, a risky move that many legal analysts criticized. She claimed that it was her husband's responsibility to lock up the gun and manage Ethan's issues. But the prosecution pushed back, highlighting that it was Jennifer who took Ethan to the shooting range after the gun was purchased and encouraged him to use it. Witnesses testified that Jennifer often spoke poorly of her son, calling him weird and even expressing shame over his behavior. The final blow to Jennifer's defense came when the prosecutor asked, "Would you have done anything differently?" Her response left the courtroom stunned. "I've thought about that, but no, I wouldn't have." On February 6, 2024, the jury reached its verdict. Jennifer Crumbley was found guilty on all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. The verdict sent a powerful message. Parents can and will be held accountable when their actions or negligence contribute to such tragedies. But this was just the beginning. Jennifer's trial had set a legal precedent, and James Crumbley's trial was right around the corner. With his wife already convicted, the pressure on James would be even greater. His role in purchasing the gun and failing to secure it would take center stage. As Jennifer awaited sentencing, the nation turned its attention to James Crumbley's trial, one that would focus not just on negligence, but on gun safety and what it means to be a responsible gun owner. With Jennifer Crumbley convicted on all counts, the focus now shifted to James Crumbley. His trial, which began on March 7, 2024, placed a spotlight on gun ownership, responsibility, and safety. At the heart of the case was one question: did James Crumbley's decision to purchase a gun for his troubled son and his failure to secure it make him complicit in the tragedy? The prosecution opened with a stark recounting of the facts. James Crumbley purchased the 9mm Sig Sauer pistol for Ethan on Black Friday, just 4 days before the shooting. Investigators argued that the purchase was reckless, given Ethan's documented mental health issues and troubling behavior at school. The court also heard that James ignored the store's gun safety recommendations. The gun case, which was found empty on the bed after the shooting, contained multiple safety devices that were never used. A trigger lock and a cable lock, designed to prevent unauthorized use, were left in the box. The prosecution presented this as clear negligence, pointing out that James made no effort to secure the weapon, leaving it easily accessible to Ethan. James's defense strategy centered on deflecting responsibility to both Ethan and Jennifer. He claimed that he was unaware of Ethan's mental state and tried to shift the blame for day-to-day parenting onto Jennifer. His lawyer argued that James believed the gun was meant for target practice and that he trusted his wife to address Ethan's emotional needs. However, this strategy did little to sway the jury. The prosecution highlighted James's poor judgment in purchasing the gun despite warnings from the school. They emphasized that he had been present at the school meeting on the morning of the shooting, where Ethan's disturbing behavior was discussed. Yet, instead of taking action, James allowed Ethan to return to class, with the gun hidden in his backpack. Witnesses testified that James showed concern during the meeting, but no meaningful steps were taken to help his son or secure the gun. The prosecution hammered home the point that his failure to act in the face of such obvious red flags was criminal negligence. The final moments of James's trial focused on the gun purchase itself. The prosecutor pointed out that James Crumbley had disregarded every basic principle of responsible gun ownership. He purchased a deadly weapon for a minor with a known history of troubling behavior and then failed to secure it, despite having the tools to do so. On March 14, 2024, the jury delivered their verdict. James Crumbley was found guilty on all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. His attempt to shift blame had failed, and the jury agreed that his negligence played a direct role in the tragedy. The Crumbleys, now both convicted of involuntary manslaughter, were reunited briefly for their sentencing hearing on April 9, 2024. Dressed in prison uniforms, they sat side by side as victims' families delivered powerful impact statements. The Crumbleys were each sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison, the first parents in U.S. history to be held criminally liable for the actions of their child in a school shooting. Their story became a powerful symbol of parental accountability in an era of escalating gun violence. But for the families of the victims, no sentence could ever undo the pain or bring back the children they had lost. And for Ethan Crumbley, now sentenced to life without parole, his parents' convictions marked only the beginning of a lifetime spent in confinement. On April 9, 2024, Jennifer and James Crumbley stood together for the first time in months in a packed courtroom, wearing prison uniforms and handcuffs. They sat silently as the judge prepared to deliver their sentences, while the families of the victims filled the courtroom with an overwhelming sense of grief and anger. This was not just a sentencing hearing. It was an opportunity for those impacted by the tragedy to confront the Crumbleys and share the pain they had caused. The victim impact statements were devastating. Family members spoke about the unimaginable loss they had endured. Lives cut short, futures destroyed. One by one, parents stood before the court, describing how their children's dreams were taken away in a matter of minutes. The Crumbleys sat expressionless as the families laid bare the consequences of their negligence. For many, it was not just the shooting itself that hurt. It was the knowledge that the parents could have prevented it. They had the power to lock away the gun, address Ethan's struggles, or take him out of school that morning. Instead, they ignored every sign. When it was time for the judge to speak, the courtroom fell silent. The judge did not mince words, condemning the Crumbleys' failure as parents and their attempt to flee justice. He stressed that this case was about more than a school shooting. It was about accountability in a culture where responsibility is often ignored. The Crumbleys were each sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison, a historic verdict that sent a powerful message to the nation. For the first time, parents were held legally responsible for the actions of their child in a school shooting. After the sentencing, Jennifer and James were led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, their lives forever changed. The courtroom emptied, but the emotional scars left behind would remain with the victims' families and the Oxford community for years to come. Though justice had been served, the question remained: was it enough? The Crumbleys would serve their time, but for the parents of the victims, no prison sentence could bring their children back. And for Ethan Crumbley, sentenced to life without parole, his parents' neglect and decisions had cost him everything, leaving him to spend the rest of his life in confinement. This case became a symbol of accountability in the face of rising gun violence. It forced the nation to ask difficult questions. How far does parental responsibility extend? And what role should families play in preventing future tragedies? While the legal battle was over, the conversations it sparked were just beginning. With the trials over and the sentences handed down, the town of Oxford, Michigan began the long process of healing and rebuilding. In the months following the shooting, survivors returned to their classrooms, halls that still carried the weight of loss and trauma. Memorials were held to honor the 4 lives lost: Madison Baldwin, Tate Meyer, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling, as the community sought ways to move forward without ever forgetting. But the impact of this case reached far beyond Oxford. The Crumbleys' trial set a legal precedent, raising uncomfortable questions about parental responsibility in the United States. When should parents be held accountable for the actions of their children? And how can communities intervene to prevent future tragedies? The Crumbley case became a symbol for advocates of stricter gun laws and mental health reform, shining a light on gaps in school systems and parenting accountability. Some states began proposing new legislation focused on secure firearm storage, ensuring that guns would be locked away from minors. Others turned their attention to school interventions, making sure that troubled students, like Ethan, were identified and helped before it was too late. The The Crumbly case also left many wondering. What if someone had acted differently? What if a teacher, parent, or school counselor had stepped in sooner? Could the lives of 4 students, and even Ethan's, have been spared? These are the haunting questions that the Oxford community, and indeed the nation, will wrestle with for years to come. Meanwhile, Ethan Crumbley sits in prison, serving life without parole, a troubled child who never received the help he needed, trapped by his parents' poor choices and his own destructive impulses. Ironically, in the structure of prison, Ethan found stability that had been missing throughout his life. But it came far too late. As Oxford heals, the tragedy remains a painful reminder that responsibility begins at home, that parental involvement and proper firearm safety are essential to preventing future loss. The students of Oxford High School continue to push for change, determined that their classmates' lives were not lost in vain. The Oxford High School shooting is a story of missed warnings, unimaginable loss, and unprecedented accountability. It's a reminder that every choice matters, and that change only happens when communities, schools, and families come together. For the families of the victims, justice may have been served, but the pain of their loss will never fully fade. For the Crumbleys, 10 to 15 years behind bars is a stark lesson in the consequences of neglect and irresponsibility. And for Ethan, a lifetime behind prison walls is the tragic ending to a life that might have gone another way if someone, somewhere, had stepped in sooner.
We are all here because of me today, of what I did. My actions were because of what I chose to do. I could not stop myself, but I am the one who led to why we are here today. I do not diminish any ability to anyone who could have stopped me, of anyone of a school or parents. They did not know, and I did not tell them what I planned to do, so they are not at fault of what I've done. I am a really bad person. I have done terrible things that no one should ever do. I have lied, been not trustworthy. I've hurt many people, and that's what I've done, and I'm not denying it, but that's not who I plan on to be. Whatever sentence it is, I do plan to be better than I am. I don't know if you believe that, but records of 15, 20, 25 years can show that it will change. Because it may not show it now with only 2 years of records, but I am trying. And all I want is for the people I hurt to just have a final sense of culpability that justice has somewhat been served in any capacity that they can recognize it with. Any sentence that they ask for, I ask that you do impose it on me, because I want them to be happy, and I want them to feel secure and safe, and I do not want them to worry another day. So I really am sorry for what I've done, for what I've taken of them. I cannot give it back, but I can try my best in the future to help other people, and that is what I will do. So, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Before we conclude, we want to take a moment to express our deepest condolences to the families, friends, and everyone impacted by the Oxford High School tragedy. No words can truly capture the pain and loss you have endured. We honor the lives of Madison Baldwin, Tate Meyer, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling, and the strength shown by the survivors, families, and the entire community of Oxford. This story has been about more than just the events of one day. It is a story of grief, accountability, and reflection. A story that has forever changed not only those who experienced it firsthand, but also the nation watching from afar. To those still living with the trauma, know that you are not alone. We hope this series has honored the memory of the victims and brought awareness to the importance of compassion, responsibility, and prevention. If you or anyone you know is struggling with the aftermath of this tragedy or needs support, please don't hesitate to reach out for help. Healing is a journey, and we stand with you as you continue to move forward day by day. Thank you for joining us for this episode of our Modern Crime series. The story of the Oxford High School tragedy serves as a reminder that awareness, accountability, and compassion are essential to creating a safer future. If you found this video insightful, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll stay connected as we continue to explore more stories of real-world events, the lessons they leave behind, and the impact they have on our society. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll never miss an episode. Your support helps us spread these important conversations and build a community that seeks change and understanding. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until then, take care and continue to be part of the conversation that drives positive change.